Should questions be asked of the government during escalating tensions with India's neighbor Pakistan? Should there be a demand for facts? Should these facts be reported even if they seem on the face of it not to serve national interest? Are all those who question the different range of figures of casualties from the Balakot strikes last week anti-nationals, unpatriotic? How do journalists make these decisions? Now, these are questions being asked in our newsroom and possibly across the country, but it's not just a question for journalists, honestly. It's at the very core of the freedom to speak, question and analyze facts for themselves that every Indian has as per the Constitution. To speak on this core question on whether facts are more important or national interest, I'm joined now by senior journalists Aarti Jairath and Ajay Shukla. Thank you to both of you for speaking with me. I'm going to start with Ajay, and I was very keen to have you on this show, Ajay, because A, you cover defense, and B, you've seen the other side of this. You've served in the army, and when you speak to former army men now, they talk about how any kind of information that shows that we didn't do as well as it seems demoralizes the soldier on the front, which of course no one wants. What are the kind of challenges a journalist like you faces at a time like what we saw last week?
Well, Tamanna, the first challenge, of course, is to get access to good, stable, authoritative information, and that can only come in a situation like this from the government. It is up to the government to control information flows, make sure that journalists are getting access to good quality, factual, accurate and complete information, and that in itself is the first major step that needs to be taken to prevent people from relying on hearsay, on second-hand accounts, on accounts from people who may have got only a very small part of the picture. So the biggest challenge is, in fact, one that lies in the hands of the government itself, and that is to ensure that there's a flow of good, accurate, timely information. But that having been said, then that's where the second challenge comes in. The journalist cannot and should not just assume that everything that is being said by the government is absolutely correct. So the challenge then becomes to verify some of that information from other sources, from people on the ground who are close to where the action is, from people connected to the decision making, from people who were connected earlier to decision making of this kind. And with that, the journalist then tends to get a sort of a verification of some kind. Now, I have to tell you that it is in many cases because their access to war zones or to the place where the fighting is going on is highly restricted and very often dangerous for the people concerned. It may not be possible to assume that or to cross-check that information right away. But that effort must continue. The point that I'm making is that it cannot be taken for granted that everything that the government says is absolutely accurate, because governments, as we all know, tend to tailor information to suit their particular ends and means and sort of objectives, which may not always be in the national interest. So it is up to the journalist to first ensure that he gets access to information and then to, wherever possible, cross-check and verify that information from other sources. Tamanna?
You know, Aarti Jairath, I want you to come into this because all of last week, I think a lot of journalists may have asked themselves this question. There was an information overload or a lot more information coming in from Pakistan, official information from the Prime Minister, from the spokesperson of the Pakistan Army, through tweets, videos, etc. There was not much official information relatively coming in from India. And I guess every journalist questioned themselves that if I, retweet or report what Imran Khan is saying, where he is in this context, in that one sentence, making a big gesture, am I working against my own country? How do you resolve that issue, or what is the road that journalists should take?
Well, firstly, Tamanna, I think we should be very clear that this is not a war situation. So censorship rules do not apply here. You know, when two countries are at war, yes, the government steps in and it censors news, and, you know, it has absolute control over what comes on television or in newspapers or whatever. But this is not a war situation. Secondly, I think the problem has been exacerbated by the fact that there is very little information that has come from the government. We've had two kinds of information that have come. One was, of course, the official statement from the Foreign Secretary the day after the Balakot strike, which was just a very terse statement and did not reveal very much except that a strike had taken place and something was destroyed and some terrorists were killed. That's all it said. But otherwise, the information that has been coming is of two kinds. One is sourced information, and those really amount to plants, because if you read the kind, you know, it's been so contradictory and so different. One media house is reporting something, another media house is reporting something entirely different, and it's all being attributed to sources, and they're not even defining the sources, whether these are sources in the defense, or these are sources in the government, or these are sources in the strategic establishment. So we don't know where all this information is coming from. And the second type of information we've been getting is this plethora of statements from motor-mouthed, ministers in the government who've been, you know, banding figures and facts around like, like anything. I mean, you had the defense minister one day say 300 people were killed. Then you had another minister say that no, we didn't, the purpose was not to kill anybody, the purpose was only to go in and make a point. Then you had the chief, the president of the ruling party, talking about 250 people killed. Then you had the defense minister saying, no, that was just an estimate. Then you have the home minister saying, well, there were 300 mobile phones operational in that area. So were these mobile phones being used by trees? So, I mean, so if you're going to get this kind of contradictory information, I mean, obviously journalists are going to start asking questions. Journalists need to be given, you know, a proper flow of news, accurate news and credible news, so that they can report. After all, this is what happened over, since the Pulwama strike. You know, these are very sensitive and highly, sort of complex and important issues. And I think the entire country was seized with it, and people wanted to know what exactly was happening. So I think it is a failure of the Indian government to not create a credible flow of information or a flow of credible information to journalists so that they could report. And that is what has led to this questioning and, this sort of sense of confusion and, and what is, and the other thing that the media has been guilty of, and that is of warmongering, building up hysteria. You know, we even saw the anchor of one news channel dressed in army fatigues, sort of wielding a toy gun in the studio, as if war is some game to be played. And, you had this hysterical warmongering where nobody was bothered about facts. You were just hyping it all up and screaming for revenge. There was this bloodlust that was going on television. I would say we also are to blame for the way we handled it. Absolutely,
Ms. Jairat. But, I have a bit of a counter here, and I don't know how Ajay feels, because Ajay, of course, has also had a television background, as I have a TV news background. And when you talk about freedom of speech, right, you say that there is freedom of speech in this country, and as distasteful as it may be, the freedom of the press maybe includes, editorial decisions which need to be judged, but people can just switch off and move on. This whole focus as if television news was just the be-all and end-all, I think, in a sense, doesn't it give it too much importance, Ms. Jairat? And also then brings in the question that if there's freedom of speech and freedom of the press, then maybe freedom of rubbish editorial as well, but it's still freedom of the press.
No, it is, but I think the press has to exercise its freedom in a responsible manner. I don't think it is the job of the press to respond, to a sensitive situation like what happened at Pulwama and post-Pulwama and after Balakot. I don't think it is the job of the press to respond to it in an emotional manner and build up a war hysteria. That's not the job of the press. The job of the press is to report facts and to, help people understand what is going on. So it's not to start screaming for revenge. We had hashtags, revenge for Pulwama. I mean, that's not news, right? That is just, warmongering. And I'm afraid, it's true that the press is not just television, that we do tend to, but television is there 24/7. And it is, it is a huge media field, and people were glued to it because you get visuals, you get voices, you get, you get you feel that you're there as part of the action, something that print doesn't give you. So I'm afraid that, we have to look at what television was doing, and television was definitely creating a war hysteria in the country, which it should not have done. Its job is to report facts.
Yeah.
And one reason why it was doing it was also that there was not enough information coming from the government, so there were no facts to really report.
Yeah, and you need to fill up news cycles and all of that. But Ajay, I just want to make the point a little broader about what happened next. When journalists started asking questions about what is going on, especially when international media visited the site and put out a series of reports, there was satellite imagery which, on the face of it countered India's claims, which were not even official claims. When those questions started being asked, the response was that, you don't believe in the army. You don't, have faith in your country. You don't love your country. You're not patriotic. And I think that has led to a lot of maybe self-censorship and people recoiling and, asking themselves, and also the fear of being shouted down by the mob. How do you see that development?
Well, that's a serious problem, because it betrays a complete lack of understanding of what the role of the media is. The role of the media structurally in the Republic of India, just like the other organs of the state and the government, has a certain role, and that role is to disseminate information and to ensure and make sure and verify and confirm that the information that you're disseminating is correct and true, so that the citizens of the country can then make their minds up about issues like who they're going to vote for, what form of government they want, and so on and so forth. So if the media, instead of doing that, then joins the bandwagon and joins the baying mob, then I'm afraid it's betraying the role that it is intended to play in the structure of a democratic country. There seems to be a lack of understanding of this. But, let's just take a step back and look at this structurally. And I think the reason why we are in such a dire strait about this whole thing is because three really disconcerting trends come together. One is a group of journalists, or a pack of journalists, or a whole community of journalists that doesn't quite understand its role, and that believes that its role is to dress up information and so on. The second thing is a group of television channels, or an entire television ecostructure that is really short of money and that is reliant on viewership, and that is ready to do anything to increase viewership, even take the country towards war. And the third thing is a sort of audience over there, the people of the country, who are really not aware of the issues at stake over here, who have not been properly educated, and who are ready to swallow anything that confirms their sense of community. And when all of these come together, you have a structure where there is a demand for jingoistic news because the people want it, and the journalists tend to go along with that because that's what their editors want, and the editors want that because that increases viewership, and you're stuck in this vicious circle that really takes you in a downward spiral towards war and confrontation. I think since all of us are journalists, I think what we really need to be most concerned about is the way that journalists have been reporting things. The defense community, the defense beat, speaking for myself, and for the people who I report with, I think we are guilty of having a completely jingoistic, boys with toys kind of approach towards military and weapon systems, and, oh, we'll get a Rafale and we'll bomb the daylights out of them kind of approach. That's not how you actually approach reporting, and particularly war and conflict reporting. It's supposed to be done in the most responsible manner possibly that is possible because of the stakes involved. But I think for the reasons that I just spelled out, the three structural reasons, I think we're very, very far from there.
Okay, let me just take this question to Aarti about the element of choosing which facts to put out. And all journalists and media houses and, you know, any newsrooms always do that. Let me give you a different context, Ms. Jairath. For example, if there are clashes between two communities, the standard golden rule has been not to give too many details beyond the point of which community was targeting which community, because you don't want it to go any further. There are pictures that you know, we don't show either in print or on television. We use a sensitivity there. There could be a counter argument that extends that says, why not extend that sensitivity to issues of a diplomatic scale or national security, not just with Pakistan but in any context. That isn't a journalist first an Indian and then a journalist? How do you address that dilemma?
You know, Tamanna, I think a lot of those, you know, those red lines have been breached over the years. For instance, we didn't show, you know, sort of body parts of dead people. Now we very happily print pictures of body parts. And, you know, we even show them on television. We didn't earlier mention when there were communal riots, we did not mention the communities involved, but now we do mention the communities involved. And, you know, in this era of day and age of social media with WhatsApp forwards and Instagram pictures and things like that, there is absolutely no control on the kind of information that is spreading around all over. So, I mean, I think really those, you know, those sort of niceties and conventions that we used to observe when I started journalism, for instance, I mean, I think those really, many of those are quite irrelevant today. And then, you know, at the end of the day, I mean, once you start drawing red lines that let's not do this because it's too sensitive and it may lead to, it may worsen the situation, you know, where do you stop? Where do you say that there is, where do you say that, look, you know, the press has the right to question and obtain information and disseminate it? And where should the press stop? Because these are matters of national interest, national security, so keep your mouth shut, don't report, don't write, because you are endangering national security. Where do you stop? So I think that, you know, we have to be mature about this. I think we as journalists, you know, we should definitely exercise restraint. And I think that, you know, it's unfortunate that many of us are not observing that kind of restraint and we're going the whole hog and being very jingoistic. But I think it should be up to us as journalists, and we do have associations, you know, which can, you know, sort of maintain checks and balances, you know, which should help us to, you know, to do a degree of responsible reporting so that we don't whip up fervor or, you know, excite passions unnecessarily. Yeah. I don't think this is the role of the government. You know, I don't think the government should get involved, because once the government gets involved, then there is no end to it. Yeah. What they can censor, how much they can censor.
You know, Ajay, this may seem a little insular because we're just talking about journalists and newsrooms, but the fact is that this extends to all people in this day and age with social media. Any person can play the role of a journalist. That official sort of stamp is not required anymore. So for anyone watching this and who thinks of themselves as a disseminator of information, what do you say if the choice is between facts and something that you know to be a fact or reliable information versus national interest?
Oh, well, the sort of the whole issue of fake news has come from the empowerment of the citizen to be able to report and to be able to report on anything that they feel like. First, citizens could produce sort of reports that sort of catered for their personal proclivities, but they had no way of broadcasting it. Now they can just put it out on social media, and before you know what's what, it's gone viral and it's been taken forward by a certain interest group, and it's become into the news and it's started shaping the news. So I think this is a serious problem, and it's a problem that we have no solution for at this point in time. But there's an even bigger problem, and that is when this business of fake news starts being disseminated by the journalists themselves. When the authorized and official channels and newspapers and media agencies of various kinds, when they sort of get onto agenda-driven reporting and which borders on fake news, then you really have a problem. And when you have a problem of this kind, then you find that these two agencies, the citizen journalist and the media organization which is disseminating fake news, are feeding off each other. And we are seeing all of this happening right now. There are all kinds of reports coming out of Pakistan. Let's just talk about Pakistan for a moment here. Today there was a report saying that the 21st Battalion of the Sikh Regiment has revolted and mutinied and gone and, sort of turned on its masters. Now, how do you react to something like that? Should the government issue a rebuttal? Should the government even dignify something like this with a response? Because if you start rebutting and more of this stuff starts coming out, where do you stop? So I think that there are certain issues that have been raised by this whole business of social media and the empowerment of sort of news disseminators that we absolutely have no answers for at this point in time, and nobody, as far as I can see within the media or government, is even looking for answers. Everybody's just happily going along with where we are.
Absolutely. It's a difficult time, and I think it's everyone's responsibility, not just people who call themselves journalists. Anything you want to add as final comments, Aarti?
Yeah, Tamanna, just to add to what Ajay was saying, I mean, I have often seen on TV, mainstream television channels, they reproduce a video which is a sting or, a video that has been shot on somebody's cell phone. And they show it, they air it with a line underneath saying that the channel cannot verify the authenticity of this video. Now, come on, if you can't verify the authenticity of the video, you have no business even airing it. And so if mainstream media is going to play along with this, then, I mean, obviously it just, empowers the disseminators of fake news even more, because they're finding willing sort of people who are willing to play along with them in the field of mainstream journalism. So honestly, we need to look at it, and at least from our side, look, we can't do anything to social media at the moment. As Ajay said, that at this point of time, we have no answers to the kind of challenges that are thrown up by social media. But at least in mainstream media, we can put on the brakes, we can exercise restraint, be more responsible, and not cater and pander to this, this sort of base kind of instincts that, these kind of social media feeds pander to.
Yeah, tough questions there for everyone. And just to clarify, this is not an occasion for everyone to preach and say that, we're better than you. I think it's difficult times for anyone in the business of disseminating information, but some tough questions we need to ask yourselves, and those who consume news need to ask those questions as well. Thank you so much, Aarti Jairath and Ajay Shukla. I just want to end by saying that perhaps it's not a choice between facts and national interest. Sticking to facts is in national interest. Knowing that may make this whole situation much easier. Thank you for watching.